Bethel Band Chat. I'm your host, Mr. Blair, with my co-host, Mr. Glader.
Hey, everybody.
Joining us today is our guest, Mr. Bob Muyskens, YouTube personality and tuba player extraordinaire. Mr. Muyskens, welcome to Bethel Band Chat.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What high school did you go to? Maybe your undergrad and grad school, stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm from Ohio. I grew up in the Columbus area in Dublin on the northwest side of Columbus. I was born in Michigan, but I moved to Ohio when I was like 4. So I basically completely grew up in Ohio. I went to Dublin City schools. I went to Dublin Coffman High School. We had a pretty big marching band. We went to state competitions and stuff. And after high school, I went to the University of Cincinnati, which is actually where I met Mr. Glader. And we became friends and made some music together.
When did you graduate from Dublin Coffman?
I graduated from high school in 2007.
Okay. I went to Westerville South High School, so
nice.
I definitely saw the Coffman band a couple times. Pretty good.
Yeah, those green uniforms stand out pretty good in the Columbus area.
Definitely.
A few green ones, I think.
Bob, I'm jealous of your microphone right now. I mean, your voice just sounds so deep and resonant. It's great.
Just like a tuba.
How about, speaking of the tuba, what year in school were you when you started the tuba? Or did you start on a different instrument when you were beginning?
I can't remember exactly when I switched, but I started in 6th grade on trombone, actually. And I think it was during my 6th grade year. The way our band director, our beginning band director did it is they didn't have anyone start on tuba, and they had all their kids start on trombone and euphonium. And then they sort of picked, I guess, players that they thought would do well to switch from trombone and euphonium over to tuba. So I was the trombone player that was picked, and I had another friend who was a euphonium player. We were both picked to switch over to tuba during our first year. So I actually continued to play both instruments. I played trombone all the way through high school and played in like jazz band. I played like 5th trombone in jazz band and that sort of stuff. But tuba became my main instrument. It was either during my 6th grade year or at the start of my 7th grade year. I switched over so that the band had some bass to it.
Well, to me, I was going to say, sorry, but that's a kind of interesting. So did you were you drawn to the tuba, or was it just your band director saying like, hey, you got tuba player form, why don't you play the tuba?
I'm not really sure what she looked for. I think it was probably kids who could make good low sounds on trombone euphonium. She sort of thought that they would have an aptitude for tuba. And it wasn't like she made me switch, but she after class one day sort of came up and was like, hey, would you want to switch? And I was definitely interested in tuba. That was one that we didn't get to try on like the band and orchestra like play and try night, where you go and you know blow into all the instruments and see what you like and see what you might want to play. That tuba wasn't even there. So when I saw how big it was, and how, sort of heard how low it was, I guess I was just sort of drawn to it, and not for any specific reason. I know now I really like rhythm section and bass stuff. I find that really interesting in music, and that's what I'm drawn to in the music that I listen to. So I think I just sort of liked the bassiness of it when I was a kid. But yeah,
I get that. Yeah, I guess it's kind of the same way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. How about what's the best thing about playing tuba in a concert band setting? And on the opposite side, the flip side, what do you think the worst thing about playing the tuba is in a concert band setting? I guess we could include marching band as well, the kind of the two main forms of band that our students experience.
I think, and this is a very low brass player answer, but I think for me, the best thing about playing tuba in both marching band and in concert band is that you can really tell as you get experience in bands, you can tell when the tubas aren't there. The tubas are what give the band sort of force and give it, just make the sound feel bigger and more rich. In marching band, tubas are kind of the thing, sousaphones are kind of the thing that blast. You know, they're way in the back, just blasting low notes, and they make hits and stand-in blows way more interesting. They make parts of the marching band show more exciting and more intense. And in concert band, you know, just like a really nicely in tune tuba section fills out the sound. It's all the higher instruments and all the technical stuff that goes on that makes, you know, the melodies and all the inner harmonies make it interesting. But the tubas, when the section is playing just nice and together, it makes the whole hall sort of resonate and sound. It makes the sound super just rich, and it's the thing that makes you have, or at least for me, it's the thing that makes me have goosebumps when you have a great low brass section. It just makes the sound huge and round and beautiful. So like that feeling when you just absolutely nail the low note that, you know, makes something perfect in a concert band piece, or at the end of the piece, or at the climax when it's perfectly intense and in your face. I credit the low brass with that a lot, and that's the fun part, when you just nail those parts of the you know, of the music.
Absolutely. I'm hearing the Holst Chacon in my head right now when you're saying that.
yeah. No, that even just talking about it, thinking, you know, some of my best memories, it's that makes the hair stand up on your neck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's like, that feeling is sort of singular. I mean, it's a very musical thing. You can achieve it in lots of ways, but tuba is a great way to get that sort of a perfectly balanced, perfectly round, beautiful sound in an ensemble.
Absolutely. I've been lucky enough to I had this year in middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th, I had one tuba player in each group. And I made sure to like show them tons of love, because if they weren't there that day, man, the band just sounded different. Completely rounds out the sound. What Holst Chacon is that?
From the first suite in E-flat.
Okay.
The very first movement starts with euphonium and tuba.
Bob, there was another piece that we played in, I think, Wind Ensemble together, and I remember it started off with the tuba part. Was it by Holst as well? I don't know. Real famous intro, real slow, like quarter notes, and that's it. But I remember it was just you and one other tuba player that I think really like started off the whole piece. Can you remember what that was?
I mean, was that the Sweden E-flat?
No,
That's so long ago now. I'm not.
I know it's you know, I guess probably like 14, 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Man.
Wow.
But I remember you were sitting there with the another tuba player, and it was, you know, you and Dr. Milligan worked quite a bit at the first entrance, and it was sweet though. It was very cool. All right.
You didn't give us a worst thing about playing.
Oh, there's nothing bad about playing tuba.
Right answer there.
I mean, I guess I would say my main experience is in like concert band sort of settings. I played in the wind ensemble at CCM, and I've played community bands since I was out of school. The big thing that happens for tuba players is sort of having to sit and wait, I think, is the worst thing. There are not a lot, but there can be rehearsals where the director has some part that involves all the middle winds, or some part that involves, you know, the flutes need to play with the trumpets, or so there's something that involves like a big chunk of the band, and it's never the tubas. The director never has, unless it's some big low brass you know, feature where it's a big section thing and he wants to make sure everyone's hearing each other or something. There's not a lot of technical playing in the tuba section. It's more about the sound and being in tune and, you know, supporting the rest of the group. So whenever the director has some technical thing where they want to run and work with specific sections or work with between stands or whatever, usually that means sitting and listening and trying to resist the urge to, you know, get distracted and maybe pull your cell phone out those bad habits that come out in rehearsal when you're one of the ones who's sitting not engaged in whatever's happening at that time. But that's probably the worst part, sitting and waiting or counting rests. Happens more in orchestra than in concert band, but there will just be pieces sometimes where, you know, the third movement for the tuba part is it says movement 3, says the title, and it says just wait for movement 4. You don't play this time.
And then movement 4 is 86 measures and then a pedal A or something.
Yeah, yeah. That's really more of an orchestra thing, but I have experienced that too. That's not super fun, but you have to do what you have to do for each performance, whatever it requires. So
all the percussionists are rolling their eyes right now.
Yeah.
They know it all too well.
We do that all the time. All right, how about for middle schoolers? I know some of them know who you are. Some of them might not. Could you describe what you do on YouTube and kind of, you know, just describe how you've made a career out of that?
Sure. I mean, so technically what I do is called Let's Plays, sort of a genre of YouTube video. I basically would characterize it as like, it's kind of like a talk show or a podcast. Sometimes that's just me by myself, where it's less like a talk show and more like a crazy person talking to themselves for 20 minutes. But basically I play video games with friends, but you know, the video game is not necessarily the most interesting thing. It's about goofing around. It's about messing with each other or killing each other in game, you know, tricking each other, pushing each other off of ledges or whatever. It's kind of like, at least for my generation, it's kind of like when we used to hang out in one of our buddies' basements and play games together. Like it was so regular when I was a kid in middle school and high school. We would just sort of plan to meet up at Pete's basement, and he had this new, you know, he had the new Time Splitters 2 on GameCube or whatever. We would all go hang out, and we couldn't all play the game necessarily, but we would all hang out and watch and make jokes, and, you know, things would happen. And it was sort of like, that was the precursor to what Let's Plays are now. That was that fun of hanging out with your friends and just making jokes and goofing off with video games. And now we record it, and it's all much more high tech, because even though we live across the whole country, we can still play games with each other online and you know, through Discord or Skype or whatever. We can talk to each other and see each other's faces, and it's not the same as hanging out in person on the beanbags in Pete's basement or whatever, but it's a similar thing where it's capturing the fun of sort of goofing around with your friends and centered around video games. So it's, for me, it's very nostalgic. I don't know if that's a common experience, but that was my childhood, in basements playing GameCube games and 64 games.
Well, I'll tell you what, I watched a great many Let's Plays when I was in high school, and I still play video games with my friends all the time. So I know what you're saying. I wonder, my question is, you know, the viewership of that, though. Like, me and my friends can screw around, you know, or you and your friends can screw around in Pete's basement, but how do you actually get people to, like, want to watch that? Or how did you maybe get popular like that?
Well, so the thing that got me into it, and that the reason that I'm able to do it for any sort of audience, is sort of an accident. The guy that I was randomly assigned to be roommates with my freshman year of college, who was not in the music school, and even though we were on the CCM floor of our sit-all hall at UC there, he was a gamer too. He was big into WoW and TF2, and we sort of became really good friends because we bonded over games and played a bunch of games while we lived together. He ended up, after college, getting into it early on. I mean, YouTube was only invented in like 2006 or whatever. So in sometime around, I want to say 2010, 2009 or 2010, my friend Mark started getting into gaming and recording himself, and he actually made a first channel that got up to a pretty good number of people, like 20 or 30,000 subscribers, that got deleted because of some issues with Google, and then made another channel. But it was his interest in getting into that world that I didn't honestly even know existed. He showed me how you can record. He taught me how to edit things and how Adobe Premiere works for video editing. He got me into it and taught me everything. And he also became insanely famous. So happening to be friends with him sort of was an easy an easy entree into that I don't know if it would have been this, well, it definitely wouldn't have been the same, but I don't know if I would have been able to make it work if it was just myself, because it is really hard to get viewers. There's a lot of, especially now, there's a lot of people who want to do that, because obviously, just like me, I'm sure there are tons of kids whose dream it is to have a job when they're an adult that's basically just playing video games. That I would have probably said that if you asked me when I was middle school or any age, pretty much through college, I think, until I realized it wasn't possible. But yeah, so my friend Mark, who is now Markiplier on YouTube, sort of dragged me into it, and it was through recording videos with him that went on his channel where I learned how to do it, and also where people learned who I was and came and watched my videos and stuff when I started making my own.
So, wow! So your college freshman roommate was the Markiplier. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, well, my gosh!
He was not even my first. Assigned roommate. I had an assigned roommate who was I think a theater major, whose name was also Mark, different Mark, who I'm not sure if they dropped out or what, but I got his contact information and had exchanged like emails with him or something. And then just randomly right before school was about to start, Mark, the biomedical engineering major, was switched in. And yeah, I mean, we really did bond and become good friends that year and stayed friends throughout college. But then he became famous, so go figure.
Yeah, Mr. Blair, I do remember Mark from those days. He would often come out to shows with Bob. He'd be at a bunch of CCM events. I remember seeing him at Arnold's quite a number of times as we were playing with Cincy Brass shows and whatnot. I think he sat with my wife a couple times at some of those shows at the time, and that they bonded as well. And it was just it's amazing to see.
Yeah,
how he's blown up. And I think he grew up in Milford, right?
Yep. Grew up in Milford, went to Milford High School. I think there's only one high school in Milford.
Yeah.
He played trumpet and marching band.
So I mean, it's kind of, would you describe it kind of, you got in on this streaming business kind of at the ground level still at that time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had started sooner, because Mark really got in on the ground floor right when people were trying to figure out how it worked, what they should do, how to do this from home. He started doing it. I really think it was like 2010, maybe sometime in there. I didn't actually make my own channel and start making my own videos and stuff until 2014, because at that point I was making videos with Mark for fun, and I was joining him for stuff because the thing that he did that really caught my attention was he started doing charity live streams. I think he had seen another person do one and he thought it was really interesting, but he basically would just live stream himself on Twitch and set up a donation site somewhere and ask people to donate to some charity. And in the early days, he would stream for 12 hours or 24 hours to raise like $500 or $1,000 or something. And when I saw him do that, that I've always been interested in volunteering and nonprofit, and I saw that and I was like, that is just him on his own without having to spend very much money or any money really, trying to entertain people and trying to use that to encourage them to donate. It's amazing because it's, in charity fundraising, you can spend a lot of money on like a 5K race or on a big event that's ticketed, or where you go and you're buying dinners. There's companies, nonprofits spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars organizing events to try and entice people in to come to these things to then donate large sums of money. And it works. But like, I've always thought that industry was or that part of that industry was confusing to me, because that's so much money that's being spent on something that's not the mission of whatever the nonprofit is. It's, you know, they're not getting clean water to people that need it, or you know, supplying food or school supplies or whatever. They're spending this money on advertising, marketing, food, you know, renting out a fancy hotel. It's all this money that should be going to whoever needs it, whatever their mission is.
Right,
And
the actual charity.
yeah, and the live streaming is like the most efficient way I've ever seen, where you can, you know, assuming you own all the technology that you need, which is quite expensive, but if you have a computer and a camera and a microphone, you can sit down without expending thousands of dollars on anything and just try and be entertaining and talk to people, talk about the mission of whatever organization you're interested in. It's an awesome way. And I have, you know, Mark and I have other friends who are on YouTube and Twitch and things now who sit down and raise millions of dollars by themselves in their, you know, in their basement at their computer, without having to do the whole ecosystem of spending so much money and all that stuff. But yeah, that's one of the things about this Let's Play and streaming stuff that draws me in, and I think is fascinating, because it's amazing. People are super generous online, and
especially
super willing to help out, which is just awesome.
Hey, what's the bigger platform for what you do right now? Is it YouTube or Twitch or what?
I'm actually on Facebook right now, which sounds funny probably to people who just sort of casually are watching streamers or watching YouTubers. Facebook gaming is a new platform. They're still honestly building it. Like if you look on the Android, the Google App Store, the Facebook gaming app still says coming soon. It's actually not released yet. But Facebook, seeing the huge success of YouTube, gaming on YouTube, and then seeing how successful Twitch and Mixer are becoming over the last, or have become over the last couple of years, Facebook just decided, like, we're going to use our huge social media platform to try and build a gaming streaming element to that. And so they reached out and had some cool stuff to offer, and so I was on Twitch, but I switched over to Facebook gaming last year. So it's kind of a new thing, but
that's pretty obscure, but cool.
Is that something that then, you know, you enter an agreement with that company that you would only stream on Facebook, or do you still share it to other platforms?
I'm actually not exclusive. A lot of the current platforms, like Twitch, has a lot of exclusivity and with their people, but Facebook was super chill. They obviously want me to dedicate time towards my Facebook page and working on that, but they were like, you can stream other places, and I can post whatever I want from my streams to YouTube or wherever. So I'm still posting things to different platforms, but the bulk of my energy is towards building up my Facebook page, because that was probably one of the things I used least until I realized they were trying to build this gaming specific platform.
Wow. Man, I could sit here and talk all day about gaming and streaming, but
and I'm sure like most of the middle school kids would enjoy that as well.
Hey, me in high school would enjoy the heck out of this too. I know we've got some high schoolers that are always trying to play Apex Legends, or you know, it's subpar rival Fortnite. But anyways, I'll ask a band related question here, and this actually wasn't on our list, but it kind of stuck out to me earlier. You were talking about, you know, the role of the tuba in the ensemble, and how it's almost more felt than it is heard. You know, it gives this presence to the band. Right now, our high school concert band does not have a tuba, and it likely won't next year either. But we do have Bari sax player, an electric bass player. I'm wondering if you have opinions on these other supporting lower instruments other than the tuba, and maybe what role they play, or speak to something like that. You know what I mean?
I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit partial to tuba. I having been so invested in it myself, but the low members of the band all sort of share the role, and I do think in terms of what I was talking about, how the big round, full sound that the tuba offers, I think the tuba maybe is the best at that, because it's such a soft sound. It's such a, it doesn't have any edge to it. It's sort of just a soft, big, pillowy sound. But I mean, Bari sax is a great partner for tuba because it is low and it helps support that, filling out the low end of the ensemble. But the Bari sax can also be interesting and exciting in ways that the tuba sort of can't. I mean, I've happened to be lucky enough to play with some really talented Bari sax players when I played with the Cincy Brass, who did things that were amazing. And when we would play pop songs or funk stuff, I was jealous because the Bari sax was way more interesting and had an edge to it that tuba didn't have. And same for bass clarinets and even tenor saxes, and like the string bass player, they all have sort of different subtle differences. Well, the Bari sax is not that subtle. The Bari sax is special and stands alone to me. But all the low instruments have different sort of things that they're really good at and things that they offer. But they all work together to fill out the band too. So I mean, it's the tubas alone would lack something. You also want to have a Bari sax. You also want to have low clarinets. You also want to have a nice, rich, euphonium section if you can, or a string bass, because there's every instrument has its own sort of idiosyncratic sound that only it can give, and that you want, at any specific moment in any piece. Maybe you really need some pizzicato bass, or maybe you really need the sort of choir sound of the low clarinets as opposed to the two. There's just, you want to have a wide range of options, and the low players are all friends, but they all also can serve their own purpose. So I would not say that you just want to have tubas. All you need is tubas. Even though I'm a tuba player, you certainly need the whole group. You need all those different voices to do whatever you might want to do in a piece for a performance.
That's about as perfect of an answer that I could think of. I think the bass clarinets offer a much rounder sound than the baritone sax, but the bass clarinet, to me, is not loud enough. That's the one problem I have with the bass clarinet. Bari sax, like you said, very edgy. It's kind of hard to mask that edge in a concert band setting. Mr. Blair, I was thinking of this, our intro music for this show. That's Bob on the tuba.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we just used the house lick, the beginning of the house lick.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was, we recorded that. Where was that? Down by the airport, right? At man,
it was like an old garage or something.
9 or something, way back.
Yeah, that's still the only album we ever recorded. So
you guys should record some more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always so new on this scene. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have been playing gigs in 2009. I was in 7th grade band in 2009. Do you mind if I piggytail off my last question, Mr. Glader? I remember you were talking about playing 5th trombone in jazz band. And then I was thinking about Bari sax in jazz band versus trombones, or like low trombones in jazz band. Jazz band's pretty new to us at Bethel, but maybe you could talk about the role of Bari sax versus trombone in jazz band.
Well, I'm certainly not no authority on jazz band stuff. I played trombone a little bit in middle school jazz band, and then when I got to high school, I actually played bass trombone because we had a brass choir, and then we needed a bass trombone in jazz band, and I was into anything music, so I played bass trombone in several brass choirs, in like pep band, in the jazz band at the school. I also played in a jazz orchestra, the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra, which was at the time directed by Todd Stoll, who's now the director of education at Jazz at Lincoln Center. He's an awesome dude.
He used to teach at Westfield South too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just talking to myself.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was at Westerville South when he was doing CYJO stuff. I remember that. We had rehearsals, I think, in one of your high school band rooms, if I remember right.
The one high school band room, but that's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, and I also played in a English style brass band where we would go and compete at NABA, the North American Brass Band Association competitions, which that's a whole fascinating world of music to itself. But so I did a lot of stuff, and I was never specifically that focused on jazz. I just sort of played bass trombone and was one of the kids in Columbus that was decent at bass trombone. But I always saw, for getting back to your actual question, I always saw the three wind sections in the jazz band as like almost like characters. They have such different qualities to them, and so the fifth, being a fifth trombone, basically means you just play bass trombone, and or you play the fourth, you double the fourth part, or you rotate. I was sort of just like the low end of the trombones, and in certain situations, you know, the bass trombone is almost like the Bari sax, where when you play low on it, it can get really edgy. It can very easily get too edgy and sound kind of terrible and be very offensive.
No,
so
I prefer it that way.
So that's a line you have to learn to walk, especially as a kid, you know, whose musical ear is still developing, and you're still learning what sounds good and what doesn't on the other side of the ensemble. But the Bari sax still was always like the coolest voice in the band to me. Like the bass trombone was not as round and soft as the tuba. You could get a little edge and a little angry sound out of it, but I was basically there to make the rest of the trombones sound bigger, sound more full, because jazz trombone playing is very, I don't know if thin is the right word, but it's not as beefy, it's not as big
Certainly.
and loud and round as band or orchestral trombone. It's, you know, it's more about the style and the feel, and you know, it's, you're playing like a character almost. You sound a certain way, and so the trombones in a jazz band just need a little more low end to sort of make them sound like a whole section and fill it out a little bit. Whereas the Bari sax would play with the section. I mean, sax section playing together when they're all playing in unison, or when they're playing some big, you know, some big shout thing together, is really satisfying and fun. And the Bari sax makes it sound super cool. But again, the sound that the Bari has, that sort of edge, it's just like the cool kid in the band. I always thought the Bari sax was cool. So it's more similar, I would say, between fifth trombone and Bari in jazz band, but still the Bari has a unique quality that it's hard to get from anywhere else, from any other instrument. So
yeah, that's a good answer. You know, as a low brass player, and I have so many shared experiences like you do of playing bass trombones. My mind's going a million miles an hour thinking of like follow-up questions, but I'll try to tame myself. I remember you just said the brass band thing. Were you playing bass trombone or tuba?
I did a little bit of both. I had never read treble clef before.
That's what I was gonna reference.
Yeah. So I originally went to play tuba and sat down, and they put the music in front of me, and I was kind of like, "Ooh, excuse me." And after the first rehearsal, I talked to the director, and he was like, "Oh, you know what? I did not even think about that." And so they didn't actually have a bass trombone either. So luckily, I was able to switch and cover bass trombone for the group. But by way of education, they sort of still gave me tuba parts, and I learned and practiced reading treble clef and learned some tuba parts. And so I wouldn't switch during a concert, because as being a competition band, you know, they were happy to help me get a little education, but they also wanted really good, consistent performances. So, but there was a couple concerts where I played tuba, and then most of the concerts we played, and for the competitions, you know, sets that we put together, I played bass trombone, because then they would have their main. I was basically doubling tuba parts. I was an extra tuba, but so they would have the main tuba players play the tuba parts, and I would be the bass trombone for the group. That was incredibly fun. Playing low brass in an English style brass band is they can't have enough low sound because there's all of the high horns and all of the just high brassy sound needs to be balanced out so much that they basically told me and the tubas to just do whatever we want for dynamics, play as loud as we want at the at the loud parts, and make sure that we're balancing out all of the brassy high stuff, even when it got quieter. So that was an incredibly fun group to play with, and it
Awesome,
developed
yeah.
a lot. You get used to playing loud, and it strengthens your lips and your chop muscles so much.
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
So I was, one last follow-up question on that, I guess. Were you playing B-flat tuba at the time, or were you playing with the other ones, C or E-flat?
I was so that group, they had, if I remember, I think it was 3 B-flats and 2 E-flats, and I had never played anything other than B-flat tuba, so I only ever played B-flat with them, since it was sort of a learning opportunity as much as anything else. But yeah, I didn't actually touch or see anyone that I recognized play a C tuba until I got to college, which took me a little bit by surprise.
Do you own a C tuba or anything like that? What kind of equipment do you have?
I do. So I sold my college horn. I had a really nice, fairly expensive college instrument that I when I went to CCM, I studied on. But I actually ended up not finishing my music degree and switching out. So when I did that, I sold my college tuba. But I have now sort of I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it's sort of like a middle quality, middle of the road price tuba from the Tuba Exchange, which is a place in North Carolina that they make their own instruments, but they're sort of like copies of known form factors, known models of instruments. So I have a 4/4 Tuba Exchange C tuba that I picked up just so I could play in community bands and for fun in my post musician life. Now
pretty
that I'm
cool.
not working or earning any money as a musician, but just doing it for fun.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was just wondering how much playing you do still.
Unfortunately, right now I live in the San Francisco area, and since we moved here almost exactly a year ago, I guess it was the end of May we moved here. About a year ago, and I haven't found a place to play here yet. We've been really busy. We moved because my wife finished her PhD and got a new job, and since we've moved, I've been working really hard on having switched to Facebook and learning new stuff, and we just haven't. We used to play. Both of us were music majors, and we used to play together in a community band in North Carolina where we were going to grad school. So we did play until about a year ago, but since we've been in San Francisco, the instruments are just sort of sitting in storage, waiting to get brought back out.
Mm-hmm.
So you did do grad school in North Carolina, is that right? Did you finish? What did you study?
Yeah, so I met my wife at University of Cincinnati. She was in CCM. She got a double major in clarinet performance and statistics. And then we both went to grad school in North Carolina. She went to North Carolina State and got a PhD in statistics. I went to Campbell University, which is like a small regional school, but they had a really top tier regional law school. And so I got a JD, a law degree from Campbell in North Carolina. So my degree only took 3 years, and then my wife's PhD took like 4.5 or whatever PhDs take. I think it's 4 or 5 years. So we were there for like 5 years basically. But we both graduated. Of course, she has twice as many degrees as I have because she got a master's on her way to her PhD. So that's just crazy. But yeah, we both graduated.
Cool.
What's one of your favorite memories of playing in band, whether it be middle school, high school, college, post college?
I looked at this ahead of time and I was trying to narrow it down, but I have a few answers to this one. because they've just had some really crazy experiences. I've had some stuff that I can't believe I was lucky enough to get to do. So the one big thing that I picked out from high school, I have a lot of great like marching band memories and stuff, but I mentioned that I was in the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra in high school. My junior year of high school, that band got an offer basically to go play in Italy over the summer, and I got to, with my friends in the band, with our director Todd Stoll, and with his friend Wes Warm Daddy Anderson, who was an alto player who would solo and sort of sit in for fun with the group, as well as be like a chaperone. Um, we flew over to Italy and basically bussed around Italy for 2 weeks, playing jazz gigs at like wineries, old, monasteries, anywhere along the coast. We played a couple of beach gigs. We basically just got to go and play jazz and see Italy. And we were a group of kids, so we got into some shenanigans. I think a soccer ball was kicked down the side of a mountain, and but we got to see Venice, parts of the Bologna region. It was just absolutely crazy. It doesn't seem like a thing. It seems like a movie almost that we got to do that. But that was a crazy experience. It was super fun to go and play music, and that was also the first time I've ever played music for anyone basically outside of my own community. And Italians love jazz. Growing up,
I was wondered about that. Like,
yeah.
would they even really like it? But cool.
Yeah, well, so jazz is like the American, or one of the American music forms, right? And so it's, when you learn about jazz, it's always taught as this is an American specific art form. A lot of music, and especially classical music, it's very European and not American, but jazz is kind of our thing. And so I when I was a kid, I was like, oh, so we'll be like showing them what jazz is. We'll be taking jazz to these people who don't. There's a huge jazz scene in Italy that I was completely unaware of. It's very popular. They had, and it was awesome to like talk to just these Italian people who'd come up after the show and have all these compliments and ask us, what are you listening to, and you should check out this guy. And so that was really just all around an unbelievable experience that I got just for being in that ensemble at the right time. But then I would say the other thing that sticks out for me is one of my favorite single performance memories is actually a brass show. It's when we did the Halloween prog rock show where we played 21st Century Schizoid Man and Tom Sawyer, and we had like a whole set of arrangements from, I mean, what was you and Dominic, and I forget if other people had arrangements, but that show, that night, that experience it still stands out in my mind. I remember where I was on stage and who I could see and what I could see of the audience. That we had lots of great brass shows. They're super fun all the time, but that show specifically stands out as just like burned into my memory as being incredibly fun and one of the best times I've ever had playing music.
That was at Motor.
Yeah.
We've had a number of shows at Motor, and I think that place is cool just because the crowd is just like right up on the band.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool the stage being in the upstairs front part of that bar there. Everyone sort of slams in together, and there's a lot more space downstairs and everything. But if you want to see the music, you have to basically be a part of it, because it's not that far from the stage to the door, if I remember right.
Yeah. Let's see. Favorite professional tuba player?
I've got some strong opinions on this one, so let's see what you say.
This is, man, I'm terrible with names, and I should have looked it up, because when I looked at these over, I was like, yeah, I'll remember him. So the guy that I've idolized since I knew that he existed, and he's not a classical player, so this might be controversial, but the guy who plays sousaphone for the Young Blood brass band is when I heard Young Blood for the first time, and I heard the sounds he can make, and like the DJ battle that he does in Warrior, and like just he has like a whole other take on playing tuba. I'd only ever heard people play, notes, music on tuba, and he makes sounds. He yells through his horn. He is like part of the rhythm section in a lot of ways for that group, and his approach to it still is like, it's just amazing. It's cool.
Is that Matt McIntosh?
Yes.
Yeah, I just looked it up.
I couldn't remember my own name if people do
It's
all the time, but he's awesome. He's fantastic.
It's amazing to think of how old Youngblood Brass Band is now.
I know.
It's like 25 years probably since they were on the scene.
That's one of the cool things about tuba too, and you go to YouTube and look up tuba funny, and you get people on the Tonight Show or something, and they're onomatopoeioing through their sousaphone. They're singing a song or screaming, like you said. You could kind of do it with a lot of instruments, but it seems very accessible on the tuba to be able to do things like that. I don't know, just a random thought there. Do you have a favorite classical player though? You don't have to. It's okay.
So, this is entirely a humble brag, non-answer to your question, but there was a Cincy brass gig we were playing at Arnold's one time, and I guess there had been a rehearsal or something. I don't know. Somehow the guy who was the interim tuba player for the Cincinnati Symphony showed up at our gig, and between sets, while I was outside cooling off and getting ready to go back up on stage, he came out to me and was like, "Man, I love your sound. I'm this guy, and I'm playing for the CSO right now, just temporarily filling in, but I love what you're doing up there." And I was like, "Hey, you're a real musician." So I can't honestly remember his name because he was only in Cincinnati for like one season or less, filling in basically while they didn't have a tuba in the group. But yeah, to that guy, you're the best. You're my favorite.
I remember playing at Music Hall, and Pavo Yarvi was just totally stumped by seeing a sousaphone at Music Hall. See, I think I've gone through most of the ones that I wanted to have answered. Oh, Mr. Blair, well, since you're bringing up that question, who's some of your favorite tuba players?
Well, you go back pretty far. If you've heard the name Arnold Jacobs, he was the principal tuba in the Chicago Symphony, and he was very metaphorical with his tuba playing. You get so much of like, you do this with your lips, then you do this with your air, and Arnold Jacobs is always just like, the air moves through the horn and the music plays itself, and you're like, that's kind of over the top, but it was inspiring at the time because there weren't a lot of professional tuba players kind of doing that thing. But today, oh my gosh, just through my time at Ohio University, I've seen Oystein Bodsvik, Roger Bobo. Roger Bobo is really fun because he does not have the nice warm tuba sound. He's got that bass trombone on a tuba sound. So a lot of his original compositions and stuff are fun. Like, okay, I'll give you a listening assignment for you two and for the students. Go look up The Grumpy Troll. Okay, it's a song for tuba. And halfway through, you pull out your third valve tuning slide and you start going like,
What grade level is that piece?
It's got to be, stupid college professor level, but it's funny. Any others that, probably plenty, but I'm drawing a blank right now.
Well, that's good. That's more than I know. So,
all right, Bob, I'm going to ask you to think back here. What are some of your favorite tuba warm-ups? Some of the most effective for getting good on tuba?
Well, my favorite warm-ups for brass gigs would be to try and find a parking spot 5 minutes after call, rush in as Mr. Glader and the guys were finishing sound check, and then tape the mic in and start playing literally at the last possible moment. So that worked pretty well. For classical, for when you're really warming up, I think it feels a little bit like a cop-out, I guess, but my My favorite thing, and this comes a little bit from friends that I've had and also from the professor that I had when I was studying tuba. My big thing for warming up and getting ready to play is breathing exercises and long tones. And it is important to get your tongue and your chops moving a little, so that your articulation isn't completely mushy and terrible when you first start playing. But the hard thing that I always dealt with was managing breathing correctly and then having your chops sort of set. It's really easy to sort of start playing, just jump right into, scales or etudes or something a little bit more technical, and the notes can be so short that you don't hear that you're changing your jaw position as you're playing, or your corners aren't set right and each note sort of has a different timbre to it. Your sound is all over the place. But if you're playing, like double whole note long tones and just holding one tone, you can't hide from your sound being all over the place. You cannot hide if your corners are wrong. You can't hide if your breath is bad. If you know how long you can play, a B flat for a low B flat, you know how long you can do it if you're breathing correctly and if your chops and your embouchure is set right, and you play and you're 2 beats short, or you play it and the pitch goes up and down and you're not even in tune with yourself over the course of 2 measures or however long. You can't That's a really easy way to get a barometer of, one, how you're doing today, because every day your body is sort of different and your face feels different, but also to sort of focus your mind and set everything and get your mind right, get your breathing right, and then get your chops at least close, so that when you start really playing, you can get some consistency. That was really what I struggled with. And so it's not the breathing gym stuff is really great to steal some exercises from, but the breathing exercises can be whatever you want, anything to sort of remind you what it feels like to breathe right, and where you should be breathing from, and how, fill up and get comfortable with that feeling of sort of holding that breath as you're playing too, because that was a thing for me. I can only hold my breath for like 30 seconds before I get really uncomfortable when I'm like swimming or whatever. And part of playing is keeping that comfort while you have, a full chest of air, and not getting tense and not trying to get rid of it, to stay comfortable and to manage. That's part of managing the air. But anyway, those are things I struggled with. So those were the things I focused on for my warm-ups. And I still do that. I haven't played in a while, but whenever I would get to community band rehearsal or whatever, I would just sit in the back until we started doing long tones and trying to make sure that my sound was as consistent as I could get it, which is harder the less you practice. But you can
and it's hard on tuba. The mouthpiece is like the size of the moon.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But yeah, so that's what I focused on. And those, I know a lot of people have more technical stuff or have more of a progression through technical stuff. But that, I guess I didn't study long enough, because I never got to a place where that could not be part of my warm up, and that had to be the main thing I focused on almost all the time.
You mentioned the breathing gym. That reminded me of 2 other tuba pros, Pat Sheridan and Sam Palafian. Sam Palafian especially was just a legend. He sadly passed away, 2 years ago now, probably. But they both came up with the breathing gym, which is all brass players should take advantage of.
Yep.
And Sam Palafian was in the Boston Brass. I got a chance to meet him. They came and played at OU. So really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, well, and if you can get the actual videos, I don't know if they're on YouTube or whatever, the breathing gym video stuff is fantastic.
It's like educational, but it's funny too. Yeah, they just have such a good time with it. There you go, breathing gym. That's another great one.
Yeah. Bob, let's try and get you some followers with the students. What's your @ with all your streaming stuff?
I guess my Facebook page is fb.gg/Muyskerm, which is impossible to spell. great marketing choice that I made 6 years ago. But I'm basically the same everywhere on Twitter and on YouTube and most of the major social media stuff. Muyskerm, Muyskerm. But I will say most of my content is also PG-13 or up ratings. I have to be upfront about that. So obviously I'm happy to have people follow, but also make sure that it's appropriate for you to watch. I do not make children's content, and there's no good way to regulate that, but I do have like warnings and stuff on my videos. So it's, everyone is welcome as long as you are age appropriate to participate in the content.
Yes, kiddos, ask your parents, make sure they're aware of what you're doing online, kiddos. I know a lot of students that I've had in the past very familiar with you. Even before me bringing that you up to them, they already knew who you were. It's crazy.
It's impressive. Pretty cool.
Oh, it's not impressive. It's lucky.
Lucky and impressive.
Hey, to be doing it this long, you got to be doing something right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Bob, it has been a pleasure having you on this episode 4 of Bethel Band Chat.
Holy cow.
Our list of interviewees is quite impressive, adding you to the list.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been fun. I as you could probably tell by how rusty it was, I haven't thought or talked very much about music since the last year has been such a rush of other stuff. But some of the best memories of my life come from marching band and the jazz band exploits I got to do, and obviously the Cincy brass stuff I got to do with you. Those are very formative for me. So it's always fun and nostalgic to talk and think about that stuff.
You gotta come back to town, and we'll get you in on a gig for sure.
Hopefully, I can still play. I need to get back on the horn before I do that.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Bob.